directors as working with the repertory company Bergman, who worked with Liv Ullmann. And
Yes.
but I'm also right in thinking, aren't there, that certain actors and certain directors have been very important to you?
Oh, yes. Of course. I'm very pleased indeed that Peter Hall, for example, who directed The Homecoming, in fact, in 1965, is at this very moment directing Old Times in Brighton. And that's very promising. But it's wonderful, incidentally, but it's wonderful for me to know that Peter and I, who are roughly the same age, I think, are still at it. And that this relationship sustains itself, continues, seems to be never-ending. Mind you, he's never directed me as an actor, as far as I recall.
It's funny, a line of Old Times came to me when I was rereading The Homecoming. It's from that song Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, which I think it's Dealey sings, and he suddenly says, something here inside cannot be denied.
Mm.
And I thought, actually, that's not a bad epigram for Pinter's plays.
Oh, well, I have to think about that. Yes, something here inside cannot be denied. I think that's true about the Homecoming, indeed. That's very acute.
I'm right in saying that Max speaks so much because he's losing.
But he likes the sound of his own voice for a start, apart from anything else. He's an old bugger, you know. And I think he enjoys being an old bugger.
It's funny, this time I felt he was less an old bugger than he was profoundly feminised.
Really?
That, you know, all the way through the play, Lenny keeps reminding him, you know, that he's just a bad cook. And actually he enters from the kitchen, which is not a thing that the world you and I grew up in, real men did.
Well, there are no women in the house, so one of the men has to do it.
But it's Max.
Well, not entirely. Sam does the washing up, if you remember. Max does cook, yes. It's also true that Max calls everyone else a bitch. That's why I think the arrival of Ruth into the house is such an eye-opener for them all, really. As he said, he says, I've never had a whore under this roof ever since your mother died.
One of those wonderfully ambiguously syntactical sentences.
Mm.
Is it true that Ruth is just a better performer than the rest of them? Because when you said about you've been an actor for 60 years, one of the things I always feel about your plays is that every character is performing. It is a kind of, to use a phrase from another context, it's a kind of war of position in your plays. Everybody is fighting for a war of position, and it seems to me that in a way Ruth's the best actor.
Well, I'm not sure that I see it like that. You're in a very, very different position. You're looking at it from the outside. I'm afraid I'm inside the whole damn lot. And so it's very difficult for me to make that kind of analysis.
Are you still inside it? I suppose, you know, there's a famous quotation from Barth who said, writers are just the first readers. Because going back to a play, you know, that's 40 years old now, which is what The Homecoming is,
yes.
And having experienced it, you can't step into the same stream twice, can you, with this play? It must feel very different for you now than it did 20 years ago.
I have to say that that the Homecoming has always meant a great deal to me. And I like the shape of it. I'm never entirely happy about the shape of the work, you know. There's always something that you haven't got quite right, you know. But I think The Homecoming is the nearest to a coherent shape. So that gives me great satisfaction. Always has. But I'm not sure that I see it very differently now than I did 20 years ago. I really can't. I can't say.
Because you're right, Ruth's been the focus of a lot of kind of critical discussion, which you don't have to care about. But Ruth feels a kind of very different character for me now, reading it in 2007, than I think it probably did when I first saw it when I was a school child. And I suppose reading this play, getting ready for this interview, that's partly why I thought it was Max's play. It suddenly struck me, partly thinking about you playing it, but the arc of that first act, which is a wonderful shape, just comes back to the father at the end. I forget what the last line of the act is, but it's...
He still loves his father.
He still loves his father. You'll do that line rather better than me, but...
Well, it remains to be seen.
Listen, but it is about fathers. He's a kind of, the figure who came to my mind reading it, although it's a kind of crazy analogy, is Lear. Because actually, Lear's obsessed with his children, and he loathes and has an appetite for sexuality that's second to none. And Max loathes his children and loves his children and has an appetite and a loathing for sexuality that's second to none.
Doesn't get it very far, though. Poor old chap.
Do you feel sorry for him?
Yes, I do, to a certain extent. You see, that scene at the end of Act One, when he confronts her and insults her deeply, disgustingly, really, calls her a slop bucket, really, bedpan. But she will not be moved. And I think he realizes that he's really faced with something which he did not expect. That she has an inner strength and, in fact, dignity, which will simply not be undermined by his brutality. They're not only his, but Lenny's also, and to a certain extent, Teddy. So they're a funny old lot, I have to say.
Looking back now, does it seem to you they were a funny old lot that you drew on from your own earlier life? Because it's the last of your plays that I think refers in some kind of indirect way to the kind of history out of which made you what you were.
Well, my family were nothing like this family. My father could be a bit somewhat irascible at times, but which father isn't? But he was nothing like Max. So I didn't draw on really on my own experience. It's a fiction.
You're doing The Homecoming for radio, but of course it was the theatre play, but you've also written for radio numerous times.
Oh, yes. Well, radio saved my life, really. In 1958, when, I played The Birthday Party, was a total disaster in London. And my wife and I had just had a baby. He was about 2 or 3 months old. I had absolutely no money at all. I think I had about £60, which I thought would take us through the next 3 months. So it was pretty desperate, the state of affairs. And it seemed to be raining all the time, too. It was very cold. And suddenly Donald McWhinney invited me to come and see him at the third programme and commissioned me to do a play. He said, just go away and write something. And I wrote A Slight Ache, which started a long career on radio, actually, because I've been in and out of radio ever since, with many, many different hats on. So I've always enjoyed it immensely. Oddly enough, I did, a couple of years ago, I acted in A Slight Ache on radio. And so that was, the wheel had come full circle. So I've enjoyed radio very, very much. It's very important for me.